Hello there, Mr. K here, the mediocre painter, and I've been painting miniatures for some 30 odd years, and I'm doing YouTube videos to get you into the wargaming hobby, because I've made the mistakes, so you don't have to. So today I'm going to be doing a painting guide on how I painted my Zarbag's Gitz from Nightvault Shadespire, the board game from Games Workshop. So here they are, and these chaps are a yellow plastic. Curious, on the back actually they show them all painted. On some of the other boxes they just show them in their raw form, which is kind of interesting. So these guys are push to fit miniatures, as all the Shadespire miniatures are, and they are a yellow plastic, which is normally a little softer and therefore a little easier to push fit together. Not so much in this case. They've definitely added a little something to it to make that yellow plastic a little harder, which is good. And because these miniatures are quite small, they can be quite troublesome to push fit, particularly into the bases. Even if you use the techniques I've described in my video up here, they're not always so persuasive to go in. And also, on a number of them, you are going to need to be using a little bit of green stuff in order to fill in some gaps. In fact, I just realised that I missed a gap on the Goblin fanatic over here. He's actually got a little bit of a gap going on because I missed it when I was assembling. As you can, I don't know whether you can see that there, but you can see the gap. C'est la vie, that's the way it goes sometimes. So they don't quite push fit together as perfectly as some of the other minis in the range. Are they the absolute worst? No, but they are tricky, to get into those bases because they are a smaller mini. You can't quite get your hand onto them to push them in, and they're definitely a tighter fit in those smaller bases. So, are they the worst? No, but they're probably average 2.5, 3 out of 10, out of 5 rather, in terms of how you push fit these things together. So I'd like to see that be 5 out of 5 for all push to fit minis, because the whole point of them is you're trying to get young people into the wargaming hobby and to make it as easy as possible, but you simply aren't there yet. However, the sculpts on these goblins are really cool. I love the whole night goblin thing. They've got a really nice feel to them, and these miniatures are lovely to paint. They're a real joy. And it seemed like I painted them in no time. I was having so much fun. Now I decided that I would be a little bit different with this and not necessarily follow exactly how Games Workshop show you should paint them. In fact, to the point where I would actually have some of my goblins not be green goblins. So I started out with Stickit, who is one of the archers that you have. And I decided to do him as a yellow, and I painted him in an Avalant sunset, a couple of coats, and then I used a sepia wash on him. I then used a yellow, actually I think I might have used a white paint then to highlight him and then go over with a deep yellow sort of colour. I was quite pleased with the way that kind of turned out. Really am pleased with the way he sort of came through there. So in terms of his body, he's a night goblin, so basically I did him in a grey and then used a black wash and then highlighted back up with the grey. I kept it really, really simple. In terms of his belt, it's just a piece of rope, so I used a flesh wash followed by an agrax, and the same goes on the binding on the actual bow itself. The bow brown is just a bestial brown with an agrax wash. Same goes with the binding and the brown used on his quiver, I believe. Now his arrows I actually had a little bit of fun with. So the arrows are kind of got like mushroom tops to them, so I decided I would use a metallic purple, an amethyst purple that I had, and then I washed that with a purple wash as the tops, and I'm quite pleased with the way that turned out. It was kind of cool. In terms of the arrow that's through his head, I just basically used a brown for the shaft. I actually used a flesh with a brown wash for the quiver, for the flight, and then I used simply a chainmail silver with a mithril highlight for the end. On this particular base, I had some fun with a new wash that I got from Instar Paints. And so I painted it in a standard grey. I then used a silver wash from Instar Paints, and it makes it kind of twinkle, and then I highlighted back over the top with a thin down, I then did another wash with a thin down Agrax, and then basically a dry brush with a white. And it worked out quite well. I'm really quite pleased. You can't really see in photographs, I'm afraid, exactly how it twinkles, but it does twinkle a little bit, and it's pretty cool. This particular base has a couple of little sort of bugs in it, and I did those in an arcane blue with a blue wash, and I picked out their heads in that cool amethyst purple metallic colour, which is simply one of my favourite colours at this particular moment in time. I'm trying to use any excuse to actually use it. So that's basically how I did Stickit. I then moved on to red cap, and I decided that I wasn't going to do red cap with a red cap because I was in my purple phase, and I used a purple there with a purple wash mixed with a little bit of black to sort of darken it up a bit, and then picked out sort of the nodules on the actual mushroom with a little bit of white, and then had like as though there were a pin sticking out of him. I basically did the pin in a silver with a black wash. So this guy, I decided I would do him blue, and I used basically a grey colour and then a blue wash to get him like that. I then basically highlighted him with a white, and then went over that with a light blue colour. I think it might have actually been a Space Wolf Grey even, which is sort of a bluey grey. That was pretty cool the way that worked out. Again, the body, I done the same way as I did Stickit, and the base I did the same way as well. Nothing really new there on him. In terms of the eyes on the gobbos, I tended to basically use a black wash inside the eye socket and then pick out the eye with a red. One of the beauties of doing goblins and orcs is you don't necessarily have to do like a pupil and such, and they look just cool with red eyes. So after I did Stickit, I then moved on to Dibs, who's the other archer, and I did him in traditional way. So the traditional way, as in he's a goblin, therefore I'm going to do him green. So I used my classic technique for doing goblins, which is basically goblin green, surprisingly, green wash, highlight with the goblin green, and that's it. Nothing complicated. Tricky thing on this guy is his teeth, actually. So I did a black wash and then just got the paint, my brush, not quite dry, and then sort of like brushed it across it just to pick out the teeth rather than try and pick out each individual tooth. And that kind of worked out quite well. It's a little bit tricky to do that, I think, because the miniature is quite a small one. He's got on his base, he's got a little mushroom there, so I decided to do that, the stalk in a flash with an Agrax wash, and then basically do the top in my amethyst purple. You know, got to keep the purple theme going on here. He's got a little fire going on, so I just basically did the wood from the fire in a brown. I didn't do anything fancy, like, you know, like it was still running or anything. I know some people paint it that way, and then he used object source lighting techniques to do some fancy stuff, but I kept it pretty simple. Again, as a beginner, you know, you should be able to follow this kind of recipe well and produce, you know, half decent results. I'm not doing anything particularly fancy. I'm doing base colours, washes, simple highlighting on these miniatures. Nothing too outrageous. I then moved on to Progdonetta. Again, I followed the same kind of principles that I'd followed on the other guys. I kept the purple theme going again, so I did the grips on the base of the net with a little of the amethyst purple, and the mushrooms that I caught in the net, I did the caps in the purple, and the net itself I did in a flesh and then just washed it with an agrax. There is a bone in front of him, painted it flesh, washed with an agrax, little highlight in the bone, that was it. He does have a few little nodules on him going around, so I just picked those out with the purple. And he also has a dagger at the back, just did that with a silver, and then just washed it with the black wash that I used on his actual body. So I kept it pretty simple, and it works pretty well. So now we move on to Snurk Sourtongue. He is a goblin fanatic. And this guy actually kind of much painted the same way as the other guys, really. So basically, used a grey to basically paint him and his boots. Black wash, highlighting the grey. What's different about this guy is he does have a gourd that he's drinking out of. I did the gourd in a silver. I used the motif on it was a mushroom. I did that in the amethyst purple. I did the cap that's in it in like a white, as though it was like a white porcelain cap, and then basically did a little wash in a grey, and the band going around it I did in, it looks like did I use the gold there? I think I might have used a little gold, and then just basically did a little wash in the black, and then the liquid that's pouring out of it, I basically used the same technique that I'd used on the guy that I painted blue. So basically that's red cap, and basically used a grey with a blue wash. I picked out the sort of little thing on his wrist with a purple, try and keep that purple thing going on. The actual ball that he's holding onto, I basically painted it black and then really used a thick dry brush coating of a bolt gun, and then with a little bit of mithril on it, so he's kind of a bit dark and dirty and not too elaborate. We then move on to the squigs, Bone Cracker and Goblin. So let's have a look at Bone Cracker. So I did these in, roughly speaking, the same kind of way, and I painted them originally in a orange. I think I used is it sunburst orange? I used a sunburst orange and then a red wash on him to make him kind of red. I then basically dry brushed him with the sunburst orange again, and then used an agrax, thinned down agrax as the shade on him. In terms of the eyes, I basically used a black wash, picked out in white, and then did them yellow to make them sort of like really beady. The interesting thing here I thought I did, which was kind of cool and actually pulled off, is I did the lower part, his gums essentially, in a pink, and then washed that with the agrax, and it really kind of worked out because it is slightly different tone to the rest of his body. I was worried that it would actually kind of look the same. I like my squigs, to have a good dental plan, so I just did his teeth in a white. I basically did the areas in between, with basically, I painted it white, did a black wash, and then basically painted the teeth back up in a white again. In terms of the bone, just painted that in a flesh wash, washed it with an agrax, highlight back up with the flesh. So kept it simple, nothing complicated. The base I did kind of the same way as the goblins. So basically I painted the grey, agrax wash with that little silver wash, and then highlighted back up with the white. The other squig, which is Goblin, basically same kind of thing, except he's got some things like pulling his mouth. He's got some basically bull rings on him, pulling his mouth basically, and in those particular spots I just basically did a gold with a little black wash on him. And he's got a really cool base, got a mushroom going on there at the back, but I basically did the pool in an arcane blue with a blue wash, and then the skull basically in a flesh with an agrax, and then highlighting a flesh. So kept it simple, nice and easy. Now I'll move on to Stickit, the Squid Herder. So same kind of thing going on as I've done everywhere else really. The only difference here is that he's got quite a bit of body armour going on. And I decided to do that in a copper with a thin down agrax wash on it. And I did do the flaming part a slightly different copper. So basically I think I used a dwarven bronze for the main part, and then basically used the copper from Vallejo to do the flaming bit at the top of his squig stick, as it were. The tricky bit on this guy is, he's got his feet exposed, so you want to try and pick out his nails on his feet, so I did that with a little flesh. Also he's got he's chewing on a mushroom, so just picked out the stalk of the mushroom with a little flesh, and then kept my purple theme for the mushrooms. In terms of the pot he's got on his back, same kind of deal. It's a pot of mushrooms, so basically just did that purple with a purple wash, and it turned out pretty good. There's not much going on in his base here. It's fairly simple, but I use the same approach as I'd done on the others. Last but by no means least, there's Zarbag himself. So followed the same kind of rules that I'd set myself out onto the others. So his main cloak is a grey black wash with a highlight of grey. He's got a bone going through the back of his hat, so basically used a flesh paint there with an agrax. He's got lots of mushrooms going on around him, and one of the things about this model is the mushrooms don't sit too well in the actual base itself, so you will need to use a little green stuff and such to sort of get that all kind of right. And I didn't quite do it too perfectly, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm a little bit out of touch in terms of doing that kind of thing. But I decided to do the mushrooms like a different colour, so I did some in an Avalon Sunset with an agrax, some in my purple again, some in a vermilion, and some in a blue. Usually using a thin down agrax actually on them. He's got a couple of bags at the back. On those bags basically I used Bestial Brown with a brown wash, highlighted back up with the brown. And on his staff again used a brown wash with a brown, highlight back up with a brown. I did the sickle that he has coming out in a gold with an agrax, and I did the mushrooms that are coming out again, keeping the purple theme going. And then the bones that are coming out that are in there, basically I did those in a flesh with an agrax. His pot I did in a dwarven bronze, I think, with an agrax wash. He has got this little lantern with him. And a lot of people actually use that as an opportunity to do OSL, which is object source lighting. I wasn't really in the mood to tackle that in this particular model, to be honest. So the fairy that's inside I basically did in a white with a blue wash, highlighted up with a white. The actual cage itself I did in a dwarf bronze with, I believe, a Formula P3 fresh wash, so it's kind of like a reddy browny colour to make it look like those old lanterns. His face is kind of cool. He's got a little mole here, so I did that in the red. And he's got this big googly eye as well. So in terms of that big googly eye, I decided to do that purple and then pick out a pupil in a white, so it kind of looks like it's swirling a little bit, or he's staring madly at you, and that's basically how I decided to do it, just to keep it simple. So that's it, that's how I paint Zarbag skits. Hope that was interesting, hope you liked it, hope it helps. If you did like it, please subscribe, I will be doing more. Thanks for your time, bye.